You're listening to Pushing the Envelope, Life at the Cutting Edge of Customs Innovation. I'm Tom Muller with the Cross-Border Research Association. On this show, we explore the frontiers of customs creativity in conversations with customs and logistics experts, technology innovators, research scientists, and other leaders in the field. Industry insiders call this show the Pencast because it's part of PenCP, a network for boosting customs innovation funded by the European Union under the Horizon 2020 program. Today, I'm speaking with Frank-Heijmann, a senior executive in the Customs Administration of the Netherlands, with over 35 years of customs experience. He has helped to produce the Masters of Science program in Customs and Supply Chain Compliance at Rotterdam School of Management and taken part in a number of high-level EU research projects. He is now head of trade relations at the Customs Administration of the Netherlands and guest lectures at several universities. And last but not least, he's the author of Customs, Inside Anywhere, Insights Everywhere, published in October of 2022 by Triekes Publishing in Rotterdam. And this book is, I'd venture to say, the most complete and up-to-date introduction to the complex world of customs available in print. Frank-Heijmann, thank you very much for joining me today on the show.
Nice to be here. Thank you.
I'd like to start by asking you how you came to write this book. And are there other books and resources available to educate customs professionals?
That's a very good question. How did I get to this, to write this book? The book holds indeed 35 to 37 years of customs experience. What came out of my mind, and I had it put on paper, and I put it on paper myself together with my friend John Peters, who's the co-author of this book. I've been teaching a lot over the years. And what I always missed during my teaching was a good reference, good literature to refer to. There are a lot of books written related to customs, but the majority of the books is legal explanations. Actually, also in the Union, in the European Union, we have several books on the theory of customs valuation, on the theory of customs procedures, on the theory of Union Customs Code, previously the Codex. And this is about purely trade facilitation, very often written by persons like the World Bank, some publication of World Economic Forum. You have them of the World Trade Organization related to economics, but it's purely trade and trade facilitation. But what was not there is a book about how customs think, how customs act, how customs do. Their philosophy of the theory of how they deal with controls, how they look at businesses, how they treat business differently, what is risk assessment, what is now compliance. We talk a lot about it, but what is now the theory behind compliance? What is now the way that customs approaches the businesses from service level to controls to at the end enforcement or prosecution. And this theory simply is needed to know for as well a customs officer, anyone working in border management and the business sector. Because if you expect that the business sector is compliant, what is then compliance? And if the business sector has no clue about what customs officials mean with being compliant, then he cannot be compliant at all. So in that sense, the book is also relevant for the business sector, that they know how customs think. And then the other way around, that also customs learn to know how the world of supply chains and businesses is really working. And that was the goal of putting that on paper.
That's fascinating. And so it supplies something that hadn't been there before, a resource for all sides of the table, business and customs and everyone else dealing with borders, to understand the key principles in the customs universe.
Definitely. And there was an additional struggle when John and I started to set up the book, because you have to have a lot of things in my mind, but then you have to have it set up in the right way. And also look at how deep you go in your theory. What is the target audience? So we had a long discussion on what is now the target audience. Are it purely academics that only look very deep in the books? Are it practitioners that work in daily practice and make up declarations? And that's why we decided to make the book in 4 parts. And 4 parts means you could read every part separately. and meaning that someone who simply wants to have a glance of what is customs now about, maybe someone who's working in the management of a company that also is dealing with him in export, so they have a relation to customs, but it's not his daily business, but he needs to know a little bit about it. Then you'd simply take out the part of the backlog, part one. Now you start looking at what are the tasks of customs, what is now their different roles in controls and facilitation. However, when you are in a bit of a deeper sense and working in the business compliance or in customs and really dealing with controls, then you can move into division. What is that? It's part two about the enforcement, the approach, the theory of pushing boundaries that I developed several years ago. You look into what is now the difference between a compliant business and another business, and why do we customs make differences? What is the relevance of supply chains? This is more for the people that in business and in customs work in practice with it. And then the ones who need to move a step deeper, more in the theory. So let's say people that really do academic studies, that are working in universities in research, in R&D, but also that follow bachelor educations at universities of applied sciences or bachelors at academic universities or master studies. They move into that next part three, the building blocks. And that's really going into all kind of theories behind enforcement. It also has a lot of references to different areas where different parts of research was done in the past. And then the last part is really for the people that think about the future. And this is about people that work in the technology sector, that work in that supply customs with technology, AI, with scanning detection equipment. So that's also meant for vendors and software companies, and also for the people that are working on new legislation. So the negotiators in Brussels, the negotiators at the World Customs Organization. So in this way, by setting it up in 4 parts, we actually tried to create the impossible. And this is a book which is accessible for everyone and holds relevant information for everyone who has a relationship with cross-border trade of goods in the widest sense.
Fascinating. So really, it is a kind of a document that allows access to everyone in the customs universe, as broad as that is, and an education at the appropriate level for different readers with different needs.
Definitely. That's what we tried to achieve. We had Albert Veenstra, who is a professor in trade and logistics. We had him do the academic review on it. So everything that John and I put on paper, that it also is relevant on an academic level, and that it meets the requirements for the use in universities. But at the same time, the publisher had a different kind of editor on it, on the readability and the accessibility for all kind of levels of readers with all kind of educational backgrounds. So that there was really a match between, let's say, that general reading editing and that academic reading editing. And I think we passed in both tests.
I can vouch for that. You certainly did. And for me, it's been a real education reading your book and looking at the remarkable graphics, which we'll talk about in a minute. How did you choose the title? Customs Inside Anywhere, Insights Everywhere.
And the credits to that come to a colleague of mine. There was actually in the beginning, I had another title in mind. But as I was talking with, we were at the same time as I was writing this book, I of course do my work within the customs administration, and I work as a teacher. And I'm always thinking of new things, strategies, approach for the future, and a nice strategy needs a nice name. So I had a nice name for the book, but then it actually slipped my tongue, and it became part of one of the strategy parts in the administration already in the Netherlands, which was smart enforcement, smooth logistics.
Very good. Okay, that would be good too. Yeah,
but I already gave it away. So then And then I worked on was working on the book since quite a while. We worked on it for 3 years, but in the preparation of the World Customs Organization Technology Conference and Exhibition, which took place in 2022 October, we started the preparation in Maastricht, and we started with the preparation around September, October 2021. And in that conference, I was planning to do a presentation. And the presentation where I also had in mind, we as the Netherlands are the host of this World Customs Organization conference. We are entitled to do the opening presentation. I do the opening presentation, actually together with a friend of mine and my colleague Arno Goy. We did it. But I wanted to bring some new things out of that book. So I was doing 3 things at the same time. I was thinking of how could customs look like. I was putting it down in my book, and at the same time already making my presentation. And I was discussing with a colleague who I work with very much, which is Norbert Kouwenhoven. And Norbert has a background in business. He's been working in the business sector a long time with the data pipeline concept, which actually is prescribed in the book as well. And he's nowadays working with customs. And we were discussing about how you could present everything that is in the book. And there, at a certain moment, Norbert said, but if you want to really capture all the information that is out there, you have to look inside and anywhere.
There we go.
And that was actually the moment that we came up with, okay, but when you've done that, then you've got insights everywhere. So that was the background of this. This is the best title I can have.
It's a memorable title, which is part of a good title, but it also, as you read the book, you see it repeated again and again, that notion that you're getting insight everywhere, anywhere, and the insights are potentially everywhere. Now, a big part of your book is looking at the future, the future of customs innovation. And you describe at the beginning a futuristic view of customs. Is this vision of the future, is that going to be a bit scary for customs workers who read your book?
That's a nice question. Actually, it starts with the introduction of a new spot in December 2039, and it actually introduces the end of customs, at least the end of traditional customs administration, by the introduction of ACID. And that's a neutral network, and it works autonomous, and it works with near-field communication detection, and it takes the information of the goods itself and starts making decisions itself. And that is the question, whether that's the future or not is not that relevant. It is more a teaser for people to start reading the book and think and be aware that we, customs, are traditional organizations. Many government organizations are very traditional organizations. These are not customs organizations, government organizations are not the persons or the organizations that bring the real change in society. These are the tech companies where every 10 years you have a new top 10 of top companies in the world. Mm-hmm. However, we are part of society, we are part of economy, and the changes simply happen around us. And we go along with those changes. When we want to meet the requirements that society puts on our work, we have to go along with those developments in economy, technology, and society. And that's what that article says a little bit. This is simply happening. Technology is happening. Technology is taking over parts of our thinking, and it's going far, far beyond that what some people can imagine today. We could have never imagined that let's say the calculating power in an iPhone is 10 or 50 times as much as the total technology power that was in a rocket that went to the moon in 1969. And the same is we could never have imagined that when we started off with our Tulip 80 MB40 computers, that 10 years after or 20 years after, we were working with mobile phones and iPads. And we always had the idea that, but this will disappear, this profession will disappear, this profession will disappear. At first, it was the typist that disappeared. And then we saw in the production that certain production was automated and certain professions disappeared. And now we have the discussion again with the introduction of ChatGPT, where the whole world is talking about what is this open AI bringing us, and what professions will disappear. Will now the tax consultant go because you simply ask a question? And what showed the past is, and that's actually referring to a question: should people now be afraid of this? What the past learned is that every technological development indeed did certain jobs disappear, but it also created new jobs, new insights in the world, new requirements. So in that sense, if you are afraid of change, then it might fear you. But if you are not afraid of change, then you think tomorrow is another day with another job and a new challenge. And my challenge of today maybe be taken over by a computer.
Fascinating. And at the same time, if you're nimble, if you're flexible, you can make that computer your ally in doing customs better, right?
Without any doubt. And that's actually where we have the teaser in the beginning of the book, but in part 4, at the end, you see what technology actually can do. There are some parts also in the end of part 3 of the book where I move into what is auto-detection. What we mean with auto-detection, that you start collecting information where customs traditionally had to focus on a declaration, which is a set of information, a predefined set of information that someone communicates to customs, and customs looked at that predefined set of information and asked them the documents that actually the declarant used to draw up the declaration and started to cross-verify it again. That was the past. And what auto-detection means is that you start looking at not only that predefined set of information, but you gather a lot of other information sources. You tap into open sources, whether it's with commercial registers, maybe it's the internet, it's even social media, and you start looking for anomalies. And if there are anomalies, then you start to act. And the same we start doing with auto-detection of images, where same as automated face recognition on your telephone, the telephone says, this is you, Frank, this is you, Tom. That in future we have a photo and it says, but these are pineapples in the truck, or this is drugs in the truck. And that's what we mean with that the machines will start helping us. But there's still someone who has to follow up. There's still someone who has to do the dialogue, has to do the prosecution, has to do the control, the correction. That will never be done by the machine. The machine is an assistant. The machine is not a decision maker.
Yeah, and there's still someone who needs to program the machine to work out the algorithms. There are people behind the technology as well as in front of it. And if we work in sync and together, then things go smoothly and better. And if we see it as a competition between man and machine, then everyone's going to lose, right?
Yes, definitely. And we have a lot of discussions nowadays about algorithms taking over the people's minds, and that we have no clue anymore what the computers are doing. And you have to watch that very carefully. You have to take responsibility. As a government, you have to take responsibility about what decision trees that you actually use before you act towards a risk assessment, a control, or even the decision to a company. But I think what we have to keep in mind, it is not the computer taking the final decision towards a person or a company. That's also always stays a human being. The computer, the algorithms, the AI, the auto-detection, it can help us to select something for controls. It can help us to find anomalies. It can help us to see where we have to put our attention to, but it will not take the decision that is a human act.
So it's technology as an assistant and humans as the ultimate decision maker.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Fascinating. No, that's, and you can hear in your voice. I mean, you're a customs official with a long history, but also a teacher and now an author. As in those roles, what's the best way to encourage customs innovation? I mean, both in new tools and also in the innovative mindset among customs workers that you say is required to flex with the future and make the best use of new technologies.
This depends. It depends, and if you look at different customs administrations, then it depends on their environment how much they feel the urge to change. And I've been working in the customs administration of the Netherlands, and it's one of the largest customs administrations in the world. Not in the number of staff, but in the number of declarations that are being processed. If you look at the amount of volume that is processed in the Netherlands, and you take it only from an EU perspective, not even the wider perspective, but from the EU, then about 1/3 of all European traffic that is coming into the EU or going out of the EU is moving via the Netherlands.
1/3.
Import, if you look at the number of import declarations, and it doesn't matter, the regular import of bulk shipments, liquid bulk, faster business-to-business shipments, or you look at e-commerce, about 40% of all the declarations that are handled in the EU import are handled in the Netherlands.
Wow.
And some older stats, and this is not new stats, but some older statistics from maybe 2015, we looked into that. In those days, you had in the EU about 110,000 customs officials working. In those days, 28 member states. That was still including the UK, so 28 member states. And the Netherlands only had 4,500. So the Netherlands dealt with less than 4% of the staff, but dealt with 40% of import, 1/3 of the cross-border traffic.
So you better be efficient. Yeah.
You need to be efficient. And then the next to that, and just referring to the question about, what does drive to the technology and the innovation? At the same time, there's an enormous pressure of trade, because trade demands a smooth flow of logistics. And the number of logistics for goods that are moving through the Netherlands is that high that any disruption in the supply chain caused by customs will have an immediate, very big effect on logistics chain and on the business sector. So the business sector is customs, you're welcome to control. Actually, many businesses are happy when customs controls, but do it in an efficient way. From a customs perspective, we want to be effective. You do not want to waste your resources. From a business perspective, the need is to be efficient. And that's what I mean with smooth logistics. If you need to intervene in the logistic chain, do it with as minimum disruption as possible. And those two needs, high volumes processing, needs of effectiveness, and the needs of efficiency for trade, that is driving the constant need for change, for innovation, for indeed the use of more and more technology in the Netherlands. So in that sense, in the administration where I've been working, there was an automatic sense to do that. That is not everywhere. Not every customs administration has the same urge, has the same need. But there is another aspect to that. Even if a customs administration does not feel the urge, the need, because of pressure of trade or because of volumes to really innovate, what we saw is over the years, starting at, let's say, the end of the zeros decade, so around 2007, 2008, we saw more and more global reports being published on performances of countries in logistics. We had the Doing Business report, we had Enabling Trade report, we had logistics performance indexes. They were all coming from from the World Bank Group, from the World Economic Forum, etc. And even individual companies, they made assessments on the quality of countries. And those reports actually showed that there is a substantial relationship between the way that customs act and perform in efficiency and IT and service level at the border, and the growth of economy, on the other hand, in a country. And there, even for customs administrations that did not feel the urge from their daily needs to innovate or to become smarter, but then you saw this economical urge coming up. A country wants to have growth. And when it was shown that growth also was created, or at least the work of customs contribute to a country's growth, then suddenly customs also start moving. So if they not have the daily pressure of trade or the daily pressure of volumes, and then they start moving. And you even saw that happening a lot in African countries, developing countries, where they started to compete against each other to become better. And you saw these concepts as one-stop shop and single window that were introduced around 2002 by first United Nations. Customs need to have governments have to have one single entry point, have to make one decision. You do not need to create burdens for passing 20 different agencies before you can enter a country. Countries started to think about it. Mm-hmm. Can we be smarter? Can we merge our administrations? Can we create a single window? So there was a complete other angle, these international reports, but also drove customs administrations worldwide towards smarter use of IT and smarter use of technology. So different areas, different drivers, but same outcome. Customs needs to innovate constantly.
Fascinating. Yeah, earlier you very modestly gave a sort of a passive role of customs in society, but in fact, as you say, customs and economic development are intimately interconnected, and customs' role as a facilitator as well as a controller is pretty critical. Could you describe the Dutch customs pushing boundaries vision? How does Dutch customs, this vision, differ from other national customs agencies?
The theory behind pushing boundaries vision is that customs has enormous volumes. And what customs actually do is try to find the needle in the haystack. You find the needle in the haystack by crawling through the haystack and think if there's something wrong in there. And that is then the needle. But the bigger the haystack is, the needle stays small. So the more difficult it is to find that needle, to identify that needle. Uh-huh. And actually, what I already explained to you, the Netherlands had a mega big haystack. Yes. So enormous volumes to come in. So that's what made us decide we should try to split that haystack into, and we chose for three. And the three haystacks means we created a way that we can distinguish this enormous flow of goods, this enormous haystack, into three different flows. Mm-hmm. One flow is about what we call trusted traders. We created that, the green flow. And the green flow actually entails that these are trusted traders. They have certificates, and you can call them CTPAT in the US. You can call them AAO in Europe. You can call them Middle East bronze, silver, gold. But they have a certain status of reliability. And that status of reliability brings along that they have a high level of compliance. And if in their flows a needle would be present, then they would discover it and they would report it. So this means from a customs perspective, you don't have to put so much attention to, let's say, controlling the flow itself. You simply put the attention on monitoring the company's compliance, and then the company will report whether a needle is found. So a substantial part of the flow is split off in one haystack. Then there is another haystack, and we called it the supply chain, the yellow flow, supply chain supervision. That's actually taking off the concept which was introduced in the SAFE framework of standards of the WCO in 2005, which was actually a reply of customs worldwide to, let's say, the introduction of supply chain security after the 9/11 attacks. And that the SAFE framework of standards said we have to look as customs much more upstream and downstream the supply chain, and not only stand at the border and every day again being surprised when goods are being presented. We have to simply look up more upstream of where the goods come from. We have to have more information from the beginning, far before the goods arrive, so we can do our selections. And that translated into what we call the yellow flow. And if you have a real yellow flow, then you have a supply chain, which is actually what we call smart and secure. Smart means you have the proper data from the source, from the moment that the box is packed. You have a security set in place, maybe my colleague customs administration in China, Mexico, or Canada, sealed off the content of the shipment. And if you have a smart and secure supply chain, then you know, again, from the theory of the needle, that actually there is no needle in there, because it was already checked in the beginning of the supply chain that there is no needle in there. So also that yellow haystack, if I can identify it at the border, I do not have to pay attention to it, because my colleagues at departure already did that. And if you then look at the total haystack, I already split off 2 haystacks. One I made green, where if there is a needle, it will be reported by trade. The other one, there's no needle in there because it's taken out in the beginning. And then I have a remaining flow. This is what I call the unknown in the vision. And that remaining flow is the blue flow. And that's where I put my traditional attention. So I also set up my resources of customs. I put them in a different way. Instead of one group of officers jumping on one haystack, I create a few officials dealing with business compliance. Different expertise, different knowledge. They need to know about what is driving a business, what is business compliance, what are the internal security and administrative processes a company has in place. I have another group of officers. They need to know about mutual recognition, about the way that other customs think. They need to know about how can I secure a supply chain, what is happening in a maritime or a road or an air supply chain, different expertise. And then I have the blue flow, and these are my more traditional officers. That's where I put in the majority of my, let's say, my hands. But that's also where I put in the majority of my high-tech technology for auto detection, smart equipment, because also that blue flow needs to run fast, but still it needs to be controlled. So what I do is, with the efficient pushing boundaries, one haystack, I split into 3 haystacks, and 3 haystacks create 3 different kinds of expertise. And from a theoretical perspective, and that's also what I try to explain in the book, is that the level of total control that I put on these 3 flows is the same. I still have a certain amount of control pressure, control burden on the flow. Only the way that I do it, in layered enforcement, I use different enforcement instruments in the different flows. And the enforcement instruments that I have in the green flow are more compliance-based. They are more administrative control at companies and assessments of the quality of companies beforehand. The way of control I do in supply chains is more my international relationships with my officials, with my colleagues all over the world. It's about supply chain security, mutual recognition, and the level of enforcement of traditional declaration checks, traditional boxes. That is more what I do in the blue flow. But at the end, everyone has the theoretical equal burden. Only the means of enforcing are always different. And we hope also by that to create an efficient way that customs is actually enforcing.
Yeah, you write in your book that this vision, this pushing boundaries vision, ensures an appropriate balance between enforcement and facilitation. And you later write, there is no contradiction between these things. These tasks are 2 sides of the same coin, effective and efficient monitoring of the international trade in goods. Can you say a bit about what you mean? It seems like contradictory activities there.
It's absolutely. It seems like contradictory. If you somehow it seems to be when you are a customs officer and you are at the border. I sometimes say, you have to be a bit schizophrenic, because on the one moment, you always have to say stop, 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 because you're controlling. And on the other moment, you have to say go, 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 because you have to, let's say, support the legitimate trade. So that's and that you have to do in one mind. That seems contradictional. But what I try to do with the efficient pushing boundaries is to explain that it does not have to be a contradiction, because what I do with the pushing boundaries vision is in the green flow, I actually still enforce, I do my controls, but I recognize the business's compliance. And I recognize all the measures that the company already has in place for itself. If you look at certain industries, they have a very high level of compliance not to please the government, not to please customs. Nay, they have it simply to meet the requirements of their clients. Right. And so they do not do anything extra for customs or for the government. The only thing that customs does is we recognize what they already have in place and say your standards are so high, you're recognized to be acknowledged to be in the green flow, and I only control you later on. And that's what I mean. There you see that the business compliance level, which they do for commercial business purposes, I lean on that. And there you see that control does not need to be contradictory to what they do. We simply reuse what they already have. And that's the same when you look at the yellow flow, the supply chain supervision. There are companies, they have really, for their commercial purposes, have sealed off this content of a shipment from really the moment that a box is packed wherever in the world. If you look at high-tech technology, medical equipment, pharma industry, and many other industries, they have monitoring worldwide of their shipments. They control exactly if the data match with the loading. They control exactly the shipment all the way, and they track and trace it all the way, all over the world. Not to please customs, not to please any government. No, simply to meet the requirements of their clients. And when customs can lift along with that, we call it piggyback on what they already have in place, then they do not need to do anything extra for us. And customs simply, again, reuses what the business sector already has in place. And that's what I mean with the same two sides of the same coin. It seems on a distance contradictory, but if you look a bit deeper into it and you start recognizing what trade already has in place, either in the business or in the supply chain, then we can simply lean on what they already have and do not create additional burdens, but at the same time, controls are still being conducted.
You make the point very eloquently now and in your book that collaboration, cooperation between the various parties in a shipment is good for everyone. I mean, it is this piggybacking, this mutual understanding and working together. And that's precisely the kind of philosophy that the PenCP project is designed to further. Networking, bringing people together and making sure they understand each other's needs and are working together at times when in the normal course of their daily work, they might not be in such tight contact.
That it's definitely, and the collaboration is not only, as I explained, it needed between customs authorities or border authorities to create a mutual recognition or to create single window or one-stop shop, but the collaboration is also needed between the customs and the business sector, simply to understand each other, because otherwise it won't work, but also in the business sector itself, within the business sector. If you look at the supply chain consists of a lot of different actors with a lot of different interests. I explained that in the book. When you look at the theory of the data pipeline, that you see that a lot of people are making money with other ones' inefficiencies. And if you talk about inefficiency, if you talk about creating efficiency in the supply chain, and you will talk about that with supply chain actors like forwarders, customs brokers, agents, etc., then it's a bit the same as talking about with the turkey about what you have for Christmas dinner, because so the efficiency is not coming from the supply chain itself. And we noticed also that the data sharing, the information sharing in the supply chain that it's not coming to an optimum. It's very difficult. But that is always because people have a lack of cooperation. Everyone looks at it from his own perspective. And everyone thinks that 1 + 1 will lead to 1, or even to a half. So everyone's afraid that if he sits on information, and everyone's afraid that when you put it out in the open, that he will lose something. However, practice showed that 1 + 1 is 3. And we even had a serious game developed with TNO, Dutch Institute for Research, Applied Research. That was in a project, I think in the Cbra project, one of the research projects that are also prescribed in the book. And that was about the relation of supply chains and the effectiveness of a data pipeline. And there was a serious game developed where we had different players at the table, and every player had a role as an actor in the supply chain. So the one was a customs broker, the other was a terminal operator. We had an importer, we had a forwarder, we had a customs official, so all different roles. And then during the serious game, every person had to make certain decisions on certain aspects of information with the question, do you want to share this with the other one? Do you want to share this with the other one? And you could notice that the natural behavior of almost every player was that he only made the decision based on the thoughts of his individual interests. The nice thing of the serious game was that you could see that everyone who made that choice of sharing information, yes or no, from his own individual perspective only, at the end, he was off much worse than the ones that said, I put it out in the open and I'm confident that I will gain with it. And actually they did. And that is always the case with information sharing, in particular in the supply chain. People sit on top of their information. They do not want to share because they are afraid that they will lose something. But if they would look a bit deeper, they actually would not lose. They definitely will win. But yeah, that is a difficult thing. And the one of the other difficulties that comes to it is that when we then start about, let's say, better discussions about better information sharing, we start immediately talking about the instrument. We talk about, maybe we should create better IT, that the authorization levels are better. Oh, we should create more security levels in the IT. You know what? We should use blockchain because then we will not any problems anymore. But what they do then is that they have the discussions about, let's say, the instrument that is being used to share the information and the reliability of the instrument. But there is a level on top of that. This is the business case for business sharing, data sharing as such. And if there is no business case identified for the individual person, then you can talk about the best technology, but you do not get to that. If there is no need to go from A to B, then even an 8-lane road, completely new, will not be used because there is no need. So first you have to identify the need to share, and then the instrument. The disadvantages, and I've seen that now for many years, everyone is jumping immediately into the instrument.
Right. They're focusing on the tools as we said at the beginning, the tools rather than the gray matter that's required to use those tools. It's like talking about hammers and nails when you're going to build a house rather than how's the house designed, who's going to live there, what's the neighborhood. Yeah. No, this is fascinating. And when you speak and when you write, there's a level of philosophical analysis that I think comes across extremely well in the graphics of your book. This is something that really struck me. You can almost read the book by looking at the graphics, because I've rarely seen a clearer and more expressive graphical storytelling. Is that a reflection of the Dutch customs mindset, your own approach to customs, of your own personality? How did that come about, the graphical storytelling of your book?
How did it come about? That is a bit my mindset. In particular, when you are at a conference with 50 speakers in 3 days. Right. It's not about you telling a story. It's about the people at the end thinking of you. Hey, that was a good one. Like, still keep in mind. And that's why I started to look into the philosophy of visualization. And what I did, for example, for the vision, pushing boundaries and the flow charts that you see that I've developed, I started to work with visual thinkers. And this is a complete different profession. And I told visual thinkers what was in my mind, what I wanted to tell. And the visual thinkers are then the ones that start drawing in a way that it's understandable for people what I had in my mind. So it was not me making a very complex table. It was a visual thinker, a person who has no clue about the business I'm working in. And he tried to ask so much, so often, so long, so to talk with me that he was able to make a picture of what I was telling. And
translating your concepts into a visual language, if you will.
Absolutely. And that is what happened. And actually, that's also what I did most recently. Again, the book was published officially at the World Customs Technology Conference and Exhibition in October last year, and 2022. And at the end of we had a presentation, and that presentation was about mainly part 4 of the book. So the new concept, the future, or technology conference, you got to talk about the future. So we visualized a little bit about the future. And there I had the same thing. I had the future in my mind, but I hired a bureau, and that bureau is a company called Zine Moving Media, and they have a unique talent to make to indeed visualize in a very smart way. So I've been talking about my future ideas to them, and they started to visualize it all, and they helped me to create that presentation. And what we did actually was smashing on stage. And
it was. I've seen it on YouTube, and I'd recommend our listeners to go and find your Maastricht talk. It was remarkable and quite paradigm shifting in terms of presentations. I've never seen one like it.
Thank you.
To come back to your serious game, as you put it, of people role playing the different links in the supply chain in the customs chain. This is a really useful exercise that a lot of people would benefit from. What, as a customs official, what are the biggest challenges let's put it another way. How would you create this kind of venue for sharing of information, and above all, for getting in each other's mindsets in the broader customs universe? What are the tools that you can think of to spread a level of understanding, mutual understanding, and trust in the customs world?
I think one of the most important aspects is simply talk about your own experiences. Share. Don't sit on your own innovation. Don't sit on it, because then it will not be accepted. Don't try to be competitive to other ones. A customs administration is not a competitive organization. A customs administration does a work in a certain environment, in a certain society, in a certain economical and political circumstances. And the ones that the Netherlands has may be different from other European countries, and even more different from other countries in the world. So there is no reason to compete to anyone.
Although you did mention that the introduction of the single window was in some sense furthered by a positive competition in certain cases.
Yeah, but that's true. But that is not. It was not meant to be competitive amongst each other. But the goal behind it was to drive the country's economical development.
All right.
So, and by creating a kind of artificial, let's say, in this logistic performance index, by creating a large of you are number one and you are number three and you are number two, that was not because the customs administrations needed to be competitive towards each other. The aim was to drive the country itself to move to a higher level.
Right.
But the governments as such are not in competition to each other. Customs administrations have a certain task to protect their country, to protect their society, to safeguard fiscal integrity, and there does not need to be any competition. So, not being competitive is one. Then this means that brings along that if you have certain innovations, insights, whatever, then you share. You put it out on the table. PenCP is a perfect example of the practitioners network in customs, which is an excellent group, and it has developed itself in a most perfect way, and it will luckily continue for 2 more years to 2025, and I definitely hope that the achievements of PenCP will then be taken further even after 2025, because this is more than only customs meeting together and an official meeting in Brussels. This is really working together, sharing insights together, being all one, being all part of the same problem. And in that network, you share your innovations. And again, we are not competitors. We help each other. And by sharing, we all get better. And that is about information sharing along customs. There is no need to sit on your innovations. There is a need to share it, because then at the end, we all come out of it in a better way.
Understood. And by talking about your own experiences, sharing your day-to-day, and by finding venues in which at conferences, in PenCP Network and other networks, venues in which there's an interdisciplinary crowd, you really do you build personal connections as well, don't you? I mean, you build a level of trust. You know people now as people in different lines of work. You've heard them speak about their work, and that creates, we're social animals, right? That creates a willingness to collaborate that might not happen out of paper.
Yeah, and it's very good analysis. If you look at the COVID past, then what we saw during the COVID time is that we were very proud that technology helped us, that we were able to keep on finding each other in a way by all kind of video meetings, whether you call them Zoom, Teams, GoTo, whatever we learned about it. But what we also saw is one thing, that we were able to continue our set relationships, but we have hardly been able to create new relationships, because then people need to feel, touch, smell each other. Is what you said, social animals. You do not do that on the video stream. I've seen a lot of people in meetings on video streams, and I see them coming and I see them disappearing. And I was not happy when they came in, and I was not sad when they left, simply because I have no clue who it were. I never talked to them besides the video stream. But when the same would have happened in the office, or the same would have happened at any international meeting, then I would have had a beer with them and a talk with them. So, in that sense, we are social animals. We need to talk to each other. We need to find each other. We need to trust each other. I've been doing this work, I said, for 37 years now, of which I think about over 30 years international. And international only works on knowing each other, having a beer with each other, drinking, talking, meeting. And that's not about writing letters, writing emails, or video conferencing. It's part of the game, trust.
Just putting on your thinking cap for a minute, what kinds of fora, what kinds of activities could you imagine to further this sharing of perspectives, this growth of a sense of trust and of group movement forward among the different links in the customs chain?
Yeah, I look at, can I take the example of the change that is needed, the change towards future. the analysis of part 4 of my book. Part 4 of my book is not only looking to a future part, but it starts off with an analysis of the shortcomings of the current customs system. And I did that by looking into the history of the current customs system. I wrote a little bit about what do we have now in the world? What kind of system do we have in place in Europe? What kind of system do we have in place in the world? It came back from the early 60s, at the end of the 60s, beginning of the 70s. We had the first European Customs Union. We created the revised the Kyoto Convention on the world customs level. And I made an analysis that everything that we do today is still built on that from those times. But I also noticed that our world around us completely changed. So, and then comes the question, but how to bring a change in such a concrete bunker system? That's where the influence starts. That's where it comes to, for example, that presentation on the conference, the discussion we had in Europe on the European Commission. You need to start thinking about something different. You had a system that was already a little bit bankrupt, but then we saw this enormous disruption in logistics coming to it called e-commerce in the past few years. And then you see that a system that already didn't fit for purpose, it was not fit for purpose anymore in the current industry, that adding e-commerce to it, it absolutely collapses on all sides. It's even worse than not being fit anymore for industry. So we started the discussion in Europe, and the discussion in Europe led to, but if you have to have concrete specialists thinking about how we change that bunker, that's not going to work. So they took in people from outside. They called it a wise persons group. And the wise persons group were people from politics, from industry, outside of business, outside of the customs business, and they were put into a position to ask questions to customs. Why the hell do you do this? Why is that? How come you do such? Why have you never thought of this? So they started to ask a lot of specialists in the industry who have a very inside focus. They started to look at them, ask questions about them from an outside focus. And that wise persons group came with an advice. And that advice is that we need to change customs, that you said, they said the world has changed, the economic has changed, trade has changed, and also the behavior of business technology has changed. And take that all in account, create a new world. They said, create a complete new customs system, new system of formalities, create a different way of looking at the business sector, create a level of better liability for a person, better level of trust, you make better use of data. And so there were very good advices. And what I did is detail them a bit more in my last part of my book. These are my ideas about looking at this old industry and how you can have it changed in a new piece of legislation, which is fit for the future. And now it's up to for example, the book, I spread the book. The book is not contradictory. It's not published by Dutch Customs, it's published by me, but my organization supports the ideas that are in the book. So they also bring it forward. We speak at seminars, we speak at discussions. We have this interview. I will speak in the PanCP conference soon. Also about these ideas. Simply spread the word about everywhere where you can about the ideas that we have for change. At the end, take along European member states. Do not do it alone, and talk with the European Commission. You have to write for initiative of new legislation. So at the end, we will get legislation which is fit for the future and where we make more use of smart technology, where we have a much higher level of recognition of the level of compliance that the businesses already have, and where we put a system in place that does not create any unnecessary burden. We sometimes talk about simplification of customs procedures for certain actors in supply chains. And I say you would not need any simplification if the system that you have in place creates not more burden than it is strictly necessary to achieve its goal. That the word simplification is, in that sense, also facilitation. Maybe is, I write it somewhere in my book, even the book is for 75-80% is dealing with facilitation. But at the end in my book, I made somewhere a statement where I said maybe facilitation is not even an element for discussion anymore. Because when you create legislation which is fit for purpose and creates no burden, then are absolutely necessary to achieve its societal goals, then there is no need to facilitate anything, because what you do is simply necessary.
I will close with a big picture question, but first I can't resist. You have 35 years of hands-on experience in the customs world. I would love to hear, and I'm sure the listeners would love to hear, a few of your favorite, most surprising customs stories. I mean, the most surprising contraband you ever saw discovered, or the most clever criminal scheme you encountered. These are part of the customs universe as well, and sometimes make good stories.
When I started working at customs back in 1986, it was not far from where I live today, and it was at the Dutch-German border. And at the Dutch-German border, same as now between the US and Mexico, we have a lot of logistical issues because there's a lot of traffic. So we had a lot of traffic. We had a lot of traffic every day on the German-Dutch border of trucks, of cars, and of pedestrians. And so every day it was a struggle that we keep those lanes moving, and at the same time we deal with the trucks. And every day we had a lot of pedestrians, and there was an old man coming every day, passing the border. Every day he was stood in the row with the pedestrians, and he had his bicycle in his hands. And every day he was actually being checked. We looked at the backs on his bicycle. In the beginning, he was also checked. Do you carry something? And the old man said, I'm retired and I simply like cycling, and I move out. And that's when now I come back. And so that's my daily doing. I like cycling. And it was every day in and out. And even because he was coming almost every day, we knew him. We knew the guy. And what do you do with people that you know? Then you start trusting them. So he was prioritized. We gave him the priority. So when he was in the pedestrian lane and people were queuing up, then the officer, when we saw him with his bicycle, said, oh yeah, you can pass by the pedestrians. There's no problem. You can go on. And so this went on for months and months and months until at a certain moment, I actually was on a local market in a village close by. And I saw this man. And I met him, and I looked around, and I said, what are you doing here on the market? And I said, I'm selling bicycles.
Each day a new bike.
And each day a new bike. And that's what the point is. You can't do such a lot of risk assessment. You can create such a lot of security, but never forget that the one that wants to commit a crime, he's not focused on my general measures of security. He's not bothered with all the paper loads. He's only bothered with the focus on the smuggling. And so it happens under your eyes while you're looking at it.
That is a funny story. I would like to close with a big picture question, and ultimately an unanswerable question, but one that we've been talking about around the edges, and that is confronted in your book at a number of points. What are, in your view, some of the biggest challenges for the future of customs innovation? The biggest challenges for customs work as a whole?
I think one very, very big challenge is how everyone knows there's technology coming, more and more technology coming. And a big challenge is how we put that technology in a smart way in place. That's from a technological point of view. How do you try to tap on all these different sources of information and merge them with the declaration? That's the technical part. But also, how do you then set up the decision-making process based on analysis being done by and anomalies being detected by algorithms? So that is then moving from, let's say, the technological part, the AI part, the auto detection part, to the human part. That will bring absolute challenges on how do we set that in place. And then in that sense, also take along the people. Because at the end, we noticed already in the beginning of our discussion, we need the people doing it. So the people need to go along. They need to, as soon as the people think they get afraid of innovations, get afraid of technology, then it will not be adopted. Another big challenge that we will face is how far will technology go? Because in the book, I have the example of the artificial intelligence detection technology asset. But the question is, will that be accepted by people? How far that the decision-making process will move from the technology to technology? And then let's not forget, we are in a different society at the moment. If you look at future studies that were done in 2018, then none of the future studies, with all scenarios that you can imagine, none of them actually took in mind the situation that we are in at the moment worldwide. No one. No one looked at the relation between trade blocks as it is now. No one looked at the wars. No one could have predicted this. And that uncertainty requires an enormous adaptability of customs. Customs now suddenly need to move on sanction controls. But tomorrow there will happen something different. We need to move on e-commerce controls. So adaptability of customs also will be a challenge, because we will not end up in a stable world. The world will not be a steady situation as it is. It will change every day. We have to be, nice word is of course resilient, but I call it more adaptable adaptive to all kinds of changes. And that will be a real challenge for customs worldwide. And don't forget at last that we talked about this cooperation. Customs worldwide, regardless the trade relations that we have, customs worldwide is a family, and they have to keep on sharing to keep on developing. Because if you do not share anymore and not cooperate anymore, then you may find yourself being very innovative, but actually you are in a complete standstill.
Oh, that's fascinating. Yeah, and being a family, I like your analogies. Being a family does require adaptability. We all know that from Christmas dinners. And it requires some creativity. It requires being able to put yourself in other people's mindsets and understand what's going on. So, extremely, extremely well put. And if there were ever a blueprint for customs innovation and creating this flexible mindset with a view to the future, it's your book. Frank-Heijmann, thank you very, very much for a fascinating conversation, and thank you for Customs Inside Anywhere, Insights Everywhere, which I recommend all of our listeners to read.
Thank you very much for your interest in my book and for the interview.
You've been listening to Pushing the Envelope, Life at the Cutting Edge of Customs Innovation, a podcast that profiles leaders in customs and their views, ideas, and inspirations about the future of customs innovation. Customs innovators know this show as the Pencast because it's part of PenCP, a network for boosting customs innovation funded by the European Union under the Horizon 2020 program. Join us for our next Pencast for another insightful conversation with customs trendsetters and forward thinkers. Thank you.